How's it going? Thad Brown here with you on a Thursday. This is the Endgame. You're watching Rochester first. Combine underway in Indianapolis. We'll talk about that just a little bit maybe, but got some other things I want to get into today. Off-season topics for the Bills. A lot of discussion about who this team might trade for. And I want to go through some of the different trade targets, explain why it seems like to me right now there's a lot of reason to think that the guys that the Bills might be after, the guys that many fans want the Bills to be after, really probably aren't going to be as available as maybe some teams might think. In addition, comments about Josh Allen on a recent podcast that kind of got my attention today. I want to talk about that. And the way the women's hockey team has kind of handled a controversy that was not of their making. I want to discuss how impressed I am with what the women have done today. So those are the big topics we're going to hit this afternoon. Let's start, as we almost always do, with the Bills. And I've talked a little bit on BKL Nightly recently about this is pipe dream season. This is when every team in the NFL can look around the league and think, wow, maybe we can get that guy. You know, there's a rumor that receiver isn't quite happy. We could trade for him. This defensive end who's been terrorizing quarterbacks, well, his cap hit is pretty big. Maybe that team won't want him. This is the conversation that every fan base has, and especially those, I think, like Bills Mafia, with a team that is certainly reasonably close to a championship. And there are more or less likely tradable assets every single year, but every year you get to this point in the season, mid-February, combine, late February, and it feels like everybody's available. Anything is possible. Remember last year was Myles Garrett, right? The Bills were going to trade for Myles Garrett, and that was going to totally change how the season went forward. But Myles Garrett was never traded. Myles Garrett was signed. Now, Micah Parsons was traded. So there were some guys who were traded. At the trade deadline, the Jets made a couple big trades with Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. Guys are sometimes available. But I think the circumstances surrounding a number of players that have been mentioned by Bills media and Bills fans makes it relatively unlikely any of those players get traded. So let's go through them a little bit here, almost one by one. We'll start with Marvin Harrison, the Arizona Cardinals receiver who was a former number 4 overall pick. So the argument here is, well, he hasn't been very good for 2 years. And the Cardinals got a really good half season from Michael Wilson. Trey McBride is arguably the best tight end in the NFL right now. So therefore, the Cardinals would be open to giving up on the number 4 overall pick. But I think if you put yourself in Arizona's place, it doesn't seem logical for them to do that. If you had spent the number 4 overall pick, not only on a receiver, end of story, but on a receiver who was the best of what is arguably a generational group of receiver prospects. This was the draft that had Marvin Harrison and Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors. Those 3 guys, at least as draft prospects, are better as a group than anyone who's been drafted in the last decade or so. You have to go back to Jamar Chase 5 years ago before you get a singular receiver who would be in the same group as these 3 guys. And the Cardinals took the best one. The Cardinals didn't just get one of them. They got the best one. And as we talked about last week, the way this draft sets up, Brian Thomas Jr., who was the 4th receiver drafted in this draft, would be better than anybody who's available this year. So if you're the Cardinals, why are you giving up on that guy after 2 years? Because you have Michael Wilson look good for half a season, a lost half a season where you're playing Jacoby Brissett the whole time and the guy's throwing the ball at an unlikely repeatable rate? I just don't think that the Cardinals are going to move on from a guy who is this talented, this respected, with what was expected to be one of the highest ceilings you can think of. It just doesn't make sense. Not certainly for something the Bills are willing to pay. Now, look, if the Bills want to pay number 4 overall pick price, which for Buffalo would probably be their 1st, their 2nd, and a 4th, something like that, then maybe Arizona's going to listen. But the Bills aren't paying that for Marvin Harrison, not for a guy who's been disappointing for 2 years. So to me, this is a trade prospect that doesn't seem logical. Let's go to the next one. Brian Thomas Jr. So the argument here is the Jacksonville Jaguars have Travis Hunter, who they spent 2 first-round picks on in last year's draft. They have Jacoby Myers and Parker Washington, who we know work. Jacoby Myers already got a new contract. They're not going anywhere. Even you could throw Bretton Strange into this, the tight end who's, I think, ascending, who's a solid player. So therefore, the Jags don't need Brian Thomas Jr. He's extraneous. You've got 3 receivers. You've got Hunter and 2 guys and a tight end. There's no way that they'll have enough balls to go around to feed Brian Thomas Jr. The problem with this argument is twofold. Number one, the Jags are a win-now team with a really good offense. Why are you blowing that up? You're going to have to give me a good reason to say that this offense, that by the end of last year, people were talking about as among the best in football, if not maybe the best in football, outside of the LA Rams thing that was going on. Why are the Jags going to cause a problem there? Why are the Jags going to change anything? They believe they're a ready-to-win now team. So it doesn't make any sense for them to move on from Brian Thomas Jr. And then if you look at this Jacksonville team, like I said, the offense is really good. Well, the defense is not. And among the positions they need help at on defense is cornerback. Well, Travis Hunter can play that too. And most people think he's better as a corner. That's his preferred position. So why mess up that offense by moving Travis Hunter into whatever role Brian Thomas Jr. had? And Travis Hunter being a guy that you don't even know can play at that spot. He's the number 2 overall pick. There's a good chance he's going to be good there, but you don't know that. And even if you do put him at receiver, if he's not playing corner, you still have a hole there if you're Jacksonville. Whereas the easy solution for Jacksonville would be, we have a good corner in Travis Hunter. Let's have him play corner. And then we'll leave our receiver, Brian Thomas Jr., at receiver to be a part of that offense that was fantastic last year. What are the Bills going to offer Jacksonville that makes it amenable for them, appetizing for them to do all that blowing up the team I just talked about? You're going to do all that if you're Jacksonville through the number 26 overall pick? In a draft where Brian Thomas Jr. as a draft prospect was better than anybody you can get this year? That doesn't make any sense from the Jags' point of view. So I don't see how the Bills are going to land Brian Thomas Jr. either. Let's go to the next one. Another popular idea. Jalen Waddle from the Dolphins. The argument here that he'd be available is that the Dolphins are in a total rebuild, which is, I think, accurate. They're going to be moving on from Tua Tagovailoa. They're going to take a gigantous dead cap hit, and this is not the year for Miami. They are starting over. New coach, new GM, new everything. The problem with trading away Jalen Waddle, number one, moving Jalen Waddle adds $11 million more to their salary cap. So all the things they're already doing to blow it up, Jalen Waddle as a trade makes it worse. I know the Dolphins are doing a total teardown, right? There's no team in the NFL that's going to look at their process and say, we have no chance to win for 3 years. Everybody in the league is going to think we do 1 year, tear it all down, and we have 2 good drafts, and bam, we're right back to being competitive. So if you're Miami and you're thinking that, you're not giving Jalen Waddle to a division rival, especially one who could easily be in the way. You're not going to do that when the only benefit you get is draft picks, unless the draft picks are ridiculous. So again, what would you have to offer Miami to make it something that they would feel appealing to help a division rival, to hurt their cap right now? And again, the whole point of rebuilding is to, at some point, find good players. Well, Jalen Waddle's a good player. He's not going anywhere. Yeah, this year you're not going to be anything, but you think you can be something next year, and you want to have Jalen Waddle around for that. Now, look, if someone in the NFC, if like, say, for example, I don't know, the Vikings wanted to offer a first-round pick to Miami for Jalen Waddle, I think they'd think a little more deeply about that, especially because the Vikings are going to pick before the Bills pick. It's another thing that hurts the Bills in this discussion. Whatever they're going to offer in terms of a first-round draft pick, there's 25 teams that have a better one, or 23, 24 teams, whatever it is. And going back to the whole Brian Thomas argument, again, they're not a team that's going to want to help a conference rival. So again, this is not something that from the other team's point of view makes a whole lot of sense. Let's move on to the next idea. A.J. Brown from the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I think this one is more likely than the first three. And I'll get to why in a minute. But the argument for A.J. Brown being available is that he's not happy in Philadelphia. And although that's not been officially documented, it's not like someone's came out and said A.J. Brown hates the quarterback for sure because of this thing that we have recorded or have that's been written down and officially said. It's more of a belief, reading the tea leaves. Obviously, there's a thick reason there's lots of circumstantial evidence, we'll put it that way, that makes it seem likely that A.J. Brown is not happy in Philadelphia would be available. The problem with this is that trading away A.J. Brown adds $20 million to the Eagles cap. So it will actively hurt them this year. And they already have $50 million or so in dead cap. If you add on A.J. Brown's number, the report I saw is that it would be the fourth most dead cap money in the history of the NFL. They would have 20% of their cap would be dead money, would be being paid to nobody. And the Eagles, like the Jags, certainly fancy themselves as a win-now team. So it does not make a whole lot of sense for them to want to move on from A.J. Brown to hurt your current cap situation and hurt your offense in a year where you think you can win a championship. Let's move on to the next guy. Chris Olave from the New Orleans Saints. The argument here for him being available is that the Saints need cap space because they always do. Now, the funny thing about this one is that depending on what web source you go to judge the cap, you can get two entirely different views on where the Saints are at, which is unusual because the two primary spots that I think everybody uses as their cap resource is either Over the Cap or Spot Track. Well, Over the Cap has the Saints $8 million over the cap, and Spot Track has the Saints $42 million over the cap. And this is based on Derek Carr's contract, him being retired right now, and in theory, what would happen if he wanted to come back. I'm not going to dive into all that. The funny thing is that the two sites that might be a couple million off on other teams are like $35 million off on the Saints. Regardless, they're over the cap. And Chris Olave is now playing this season on his fifth-year option. So the Saints don't have him under contract after that. And if the Saints need cap space and Chris Olave doesn't want to sign an extension, then the Saints got to find something else to do with it. The problem here is that I don't see any reason why the Saints or Olave would have a problem. This isn't like the Philadelphia situation where it seemed like the Eagles and A.J. Brown are not getting along for a number of reasons. The only thing Chris Olave would be unhappy about in New Orleans is the fact that they haven't won a lot and don't look like they're going to win next year. Even if, though, they have a promising young quarterback, which is why I think you get to the point of this, which doesn't seem to make much sense for Chris Olave being available. The Saints have a young quarterback who needs good targets. And Chris Olave is 100% a good receiver to have on your team. And the Saints just traded away Rashid Shaheed. So why would you build an offense around a quarterback you like by getting rid of his two best receivers within 5 months? It doesn't make any sense. And look, it's not just receivers. There's another trade option that people are talking about that I think you can put in this boat. And that would be Max Crosby from the Raiders. Now, I think wide receiver might be a more pressing concern, but who wouldn't like to have an elite edge rusher, right? And to be honest, Crosby has worked better the couple of years he's played a 3-4 defense than a 4-3. So he even fit what the Bills want to do now. The argument with Crosby is simple. He doesn't want to be around for Raiders rebuild number 15 or whatever they're on. And therefore he wants out. And there's been some rumblings about it to where this makes sense. But, and I'll give my buddy Caleb Carr credit for pointing this out on BKL Nightly a couple days ago. This Raiders rebuild actually looks like one that makes a lot of sense. You've got Clint Kubiak, who just got done coordinating the Seahawks to a championship. You've got the number one overall pick in the draft. So you're going to have Fernando Mendoza on your team. You've got a solution at quarterback. I don't know if Mendoza is going to be great, but he's a viable, reasonable first overall pick. He's in the same boat as I think Cam Ward was last year, to where he's not the best thing ever when it comes to number one overall quarterbacks, but he's not unworthy of the spot either. So when you think about rebuilds, remember the Raiders just got done giving Geno Smith, Pete Carroll a whirl. So yeah, Clint Kubiak and Mendoza look way better. And even though Max Crosby, I'm sure, was unhappy about how the season ended, who isn't mad when you lose as many games as the Raiders did, I think it's reasonable to think the Raiders and Crosby can mend fences. More importantly, the Raiders have oodles of cap space. $91 million, I think is the number I saw. Number 2 overall in the NFL. There's no motivation to trade Crosby from a football point of view. The only way the Raiders would want to trade Crosby is if he is 100% unhappy. And I think this is the main point I want to make with all this, that you can throw out all the different arguments for this team might want or this guy is going to help the Bills, and if the Bills offer this, maybe this team would be interested. I think those arguments always get originated from the team who's receiving the good player. We want your good player. Here's something that we can feel okay about getting rid of, and we'll feel good about the trade. It's the same thing in fantasy football. Anybody who owns a fantasy football team will understand how many times in a year do you get an offer from another owner to where it's great for them, but it's bad for you. I think this year, with the names that are at the top of the wish list of most Bills fans, those players are not going to be available from the other team's point of view, except for 2 reasons. And I think this goes most of the time when you want to talk about trading for a name or successful veteran. The only reasons that those players are going to be available to you, and this year it's the Marvin Harrisons, the Brian Thomases, the Jalen Waddles, the A.J. Browns, the only way those guys are going to be available to you is if the team that currently has them either thinks those players can't play or they can't play for them. And it's not most of the time a salary cap issue. It's not that we have so much money committed elsewhere, we really love this player, we can't hang on to him. That's not how players of this caliber are going to be available. And think about some of the more recent big-name wide receiver trades. Stephon Diggs is one of the first one that comes to mind. Why was Stephon Diggs available? Because the Minnesota Vikings decided that he couldn't play for them. And the Bills found out a few years later exactly why. Another example of a big-name trade is a guy that we've just mentioned, A.J. Brown, who was traded from the Titans to the Eagles. Why was he available? Because he would not sign a contract that the Titans offered. More importantly, the Titans would not offer a contract that he would accept. The Titans did not think that A.J. Brown was worth the money that he wanted. They traded him away. Now, look, in both those cases, those receivers worked out great for the new team, at least for a length of time. And ironically, both receivers that we just mentioned are guys who have apparently fallen out of favor. The Bills with Diggs, we know for sure, because he's already been traded away, and it seems like A.J. Brown is headed down the same path. There are not going to be great players available for the Bills to trade. There are going to be players that are a problem on their current team for a number of reasons, and Buffalo could take a chance on. And sometimes they work for sure. But you're not going to be able to trade for any of these guys we just mentioned because they're a good player and the other team just can't figure out how to hold on to them. The salary cap has gotten big enough to where any team who wants to keep a player for the most part can figure out how to do it. And if the Bills want to trade for one of these players, the only way that player is going to be available is if the current team is unhappy with them for some reason. That they don't think that player can play, or there's some sort of like personality issue. Now, in some of these cases, we've talked about how that could be correct. Max Crosby might be just so unhappy with the Raiders that they have no choice but to move him. A.J. Brown might be such a problem with the Eagles that they might feel like they have to move him. Brian Thomas Jr. might have regressed enough that the Jaguars might decide he's just not that good. And those are the situations where the Bills are going to be able to grab a player of that caliber and not anything else. This is not going to be the Jags thinking, oh, what do we do? We have Travis Hunter. We have to play him. They're going to most likely understand that Brian Thomas Jr. if they think Brian Thomas Jr. is good, they're going to hold on to him unless you want to overpay. And that's the other part of it too. The Bills might be able to pull a trade but it's a trade for a price that they probably shouldn't be paying. Like I said, Marvin Harrison Jr. might be available if you want to offer the Cardinals number 4 overall pick price. Now, that's for the guys who are at the very top of the list, right? The elite of elite options. Doesn't mean that there aren't guys available in a trade. Trades happen all the time. You just have to find a better situation or a more available player. And I got a few names for you. The number 1 guy on my list for that is Michael Pittman from the Colts. Now, the Colts have a couple of big needs financially. They don't have a quarterback under contract, and Alec Pierce is a free agent. Now, the Colts have a bunch of cap space, somewhere in the neighborhood of $35 million. So they certainly would be able to go a long way towards handling a Pierce contract and a quarterback contract. But if you move on from Michael Pittman, that'll save you another $24 million. That's a big chunk of change. The other guys we just mentioned, talking about trade, Jalen Waddle hurts the cap. A.J. Brown hurts the cap. Brian Thomas on a rookie contract doesn't really matter. Marvin Harrison on a rookie contract doesn't really matter. Michael Pittman is not that guy. Michael Pittman is on a second contract. And one where if the Colts parted away with him right now would benefit them quite a bit. So I think this option with Pittman is one that the Bills could certainly make a move with. And to be honest, they might not even have to make a trade for Michael Pittman to make that happen. Because of how much he saves on the cap, the Colts might just cut him in general and make him a free agent to save that money. So I like the idea of Pittman. Another one that I like is DJ Moore from the Bears. Like I said before, to have a player be available, the team that has him has to think he's not that good or not that good for them. DJ Moore might be a little of both, but certainly the former, because you've got Rome Odunze and you've got Luther Burden. They might feel like DJ Moore is their third best receiver. Now, that's a similar situation to Brian Thomas Jr., but with Brian Thomas Jr., because he's on a rookie contract, the cap impact is much less, almost minimal. DJ Moore has like a $24 million cap hit right now for the Bears. So if they moved on from Moore, they'd save some of that money. When you've got a receiver who's number 3, maybe even number 4 in your depth chart because of what Colston Loveland has developed as a tight end, that's a guy that I think the Bears are going to be more amenable to trading. Now, do the Bills want Moore? Because if Moore is the third best receiver in Chicago and the Bills are going to have to pay him $24 million on the cap, it's a big chunk of change. Now, the Bills are going to be able to figure things out with the cap. They've already restructured Spencer Brown's contract. You can restructure Josh Allen's contract, Ed Oliver's contract to create another $20 million of room. In theory, you could cut Dawson Knox or come to a new deal with him to save yourself some money there. Taylor Rapp could go. Curtis Samuel could go. There are ways the Bills can create cap space. But the Bills do have 2 open starting positions on their offensive line currently. If you cut Taylor Rapp, you need a safety. You still have to pay all your draft picks. So taking on a $24 million cap hit with DJ Moore would be a sizable ask for Buffalo. And then you're not really helping yourself on the defense that much. A defense is going to be significantly retooled because you're moving from 4-3 to 3-4 this year. All that said, when we talk about guys who are potentially available in a trade, I think DJ Moore is on the list because he's not a top option there. He might not even be a top 2 option there, and it's not worth the cap money the Bears are paying him. Another one I like, Jordan Addison from the Vikings. It seems like he's fallen out of favor with Minnesota because he's on a rookie contract. Again, the cap hit both sides for both what the Vikings would save and what the Bills would take on is minimal. The question here is he any good? If the Vikings thought he was good, they'd be more willing to pay him a big contract. Obviously, they're already paying Justin Jefferson a big contract. So is it worth it to them to pay 2 receivers at that level? Probably not, especially because there's a question about whether or not Jordan Addison is playing at that level. I will say as an aside, it's not the most expert analytical or expert analysis of the situation. I have noticed Vikings fans seem pretty excited to part ways with Jordan Addison. So while I like Addison, I think it would make a lot of sense for the Bills. You could probably add him relatively cheaply, mid-round picks. He's not going to hurt your cap. He's a young guy that could develop. I think there's a lot of good reasons to be interested in Jordan Addison. The fact that Vikings fans are desperate to get rid of him offers a little bit of pause. To be fair, I'm sure Vikings fans weren't too unhappy that Stephon Diggs left, and that worked out pretty well for the Bills. One other option that was brought up to me on X today that I will bring up because I think it makes some sense. Jaden Reed from the Packers. Now, the Packers have Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks. They just spent a first-round pick on Matthew Golden. Jaden Reed is on the last year of his rookie deal. So you might have a better opportunity to get something for him this year than just letting him walk in free agency next year if the Packers don't want to keep him. Now, Jaden Reed's been hurt a lot. And for a guy that believes he can be a number one overall receiver or a number one receiver on a team, and I think has the talent for it, he's done very little at producing at that level. All that said, I think if you get 17 games out of Jaden Reed, I think he'd be a help for the Buffalo Bills and has the potential to be a number one receiver. And again, is a guy you can add without having to spend a first and a second and a fourth like you might with some of these other guys. So those are the targets that make more sense to me than the really big names everybody's heard about, the pipe dream names. And as much as Jalen Waddle and Brian Thomas Jr. sound fun because they're the big names, when you flip it around and look at it from the other team's point of view, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them to trade those guys in general and then also to trade them to Buffalo, especially in Jalen Waddle's case. I've thought the more I get in this offseason for the Bills and the more you look at what's likely to be available and what makes the most sense, I don't think the big swing for the big name player is the right play. Because, again, for most of these guys we've talked about, you would have to absolutely overwhelm a team with an offer to land that player, to overpay. And this is not a Bills team that needs one receiver or one edge rusher. They have multiple needs on both sides of the ball. So I think going quantity over quality is the play for both receiver and edge rusher, which are both primary needs for the Bills. I think you go out and you sign a Michael Pittman, maybe a Michael Evans, Romeo Doubs is available, a mid-level veteran that you feel comfortable about having a functional floor. Something that's higher than Josh Palmer would be nice, by the way. And then you also draft a guy. In a draft where you can get a solid receiver, where the Bills pick at 26, the receiver they get there won't be a whole lot better than what they could get in round 2, and it won't be a whole lot better than what they can get in round 3. The receiver draft is very deep and very not top-heavy. So give me a receiver in the draft, give me a veteran free agency, maybe one more guy from one spot or another, and I feel good about the receiving core. More so than if the Bills were to trade a first-round pick plus to Miami for Jalen Waddle, or if the Bills were to trade what the Cardinals will probably want for Marvin Harrison. And again, just to underline the point, if the Bills could get one of these big-name receivers for something that they feel is appropriate, that is okay for them to give up, then the Bills probably don't want that player. Because if the Cardinals are trading away Marvin Harrison for a third and a fifth, that tells me that Harrison is not the guy anyone thought he would be in the draft and probably isn't even worth coming to Buffalo to rely on as an impact receiver. Now, obviously, teams make mistakes. It happens all the time. And among franchises that you can count on to be wrong about their players, the Cardinals are high on the list. But generally, I would trust an organization that sees a player day after day, week after week, to understand what they are. So if a guy like Marvin Harrison's available for mid-round picks, the Bills probably don't want him. If a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. is available for mid-round picks, the Bills probably don't want him. Or at least don't want him, or should not expect him to be an impact type of guy. And that's why the lesser options, I think, make more sense in terms of being likely to be available. Michael Pittman, who I think can be a really good receiver, by the way. I'm a Michael Pittman fan, even as he's fallen out of favor in Indianapolis. I was a DJ Moore fan. I don't know where he's at right now. His head did not seem to be in it end of last year in Chicago. Addison, I like coming out in the draft. I've been a Jaden Reed fan for a while. These guys all make more sense than the bigger names that I think people have been talking about since the start of the offseason. Even going back to before we were really in the offseason, after the Bills season was over. All right, let's take a break here. When we come back, I want to talk about Josh Allen and a comment that one of his former coaches made on a recent podcast about the type of guy, the type of leader that Josh Allen is. My name is Thad Brown. This is the Endgame. You are watching Rock 1. The uncool people call it Rochester First. You can call it that if you want, though. We are definitely back right after. Thad Brown back here with you on the Endgame here on a Thursday. A little bit of breaking news for you. According to ESPN, a reporter named Kalen Kaler has located the NFLPA report cards. Remember the ones that the league didn't want anybody to find out about? They took the NFLPA to court to prevent. Well, you'll be shocked to hear that they were leaked anyway. So far, this is early. And all that Kaler has, or all that at least she's reported, is that the Dolphins were the number one team, according to the NFLPA report cards, for the third year in a row. Vikings were second overall. Commanders were third. The Steelers were the worst team, according to the report cards. Cardinals second worst. Browns third worst. Steelers being worst is kind of a note. Nothing about the Bills at all, but this was reported like 10 minutes ago, so probably won't be the end of it. But absolute zero shock that these things were leaked anyway. This was probably always how this was going to go. Even if the NFLPA as an organization was actively trying to prevent it, there's, I would imagine, any number of player reps, any number of players. This is released to the players. So there's like 2,000 players or whatever. Somebody was going to pass it along to a reporter. So this is not surprising at all. And I would expect in the next few hours, days, whatever, that there will be more from the NFLPA report cards. But again, at least to this point, nothing on the Bills. So one thing I want to talk about is a podcast that Eric Wood did recently with Aaron Cromer. And by the way, Eric Wood's podcast is excellent listening. Absolutely recommend it. He has a great perspective when it comes to football and life, does a good job of handling kind of the era that he's in right now as the recently retired, more or less transitioning to post-football life. Eric Wood's already handled his transition, and he's done it about as good as anybody could. But asking questions about that, I think, is something that he does really well and is a good reason to listen to the podcast. Ironically, maybe not, he had Aaron Cromer on, a guy who's at the very beginning of transitioning to his post-football life after retiring from coaching. And one of the things that Cromer talked about was Josh Allen and his relationship with the Bills quarterback during his time coaching with the Bills. Now, obviously, Aaron Cromer and Josh don't really have a direct connection. Cromer runs the offensive line, Josh is the quarterback, but certainly tangentially, they work together quite a bit. And the way Aaron Cromer described Josh Allen was that Josh was a Labrador retriever. That was the exact words that Cromer used. Now, what's the context behind that? So what Cromer says is that when Josh Allen is focused, for example, when it's game time and it's 3rd and 7, he's like a lab who is locked in on retrieving that bird that was just hunted for and shot and is on the ground, or chasing that target, that he is absolutely dialed into that, Allen, and nothing else matters. He is absolutely going to go and accomplish that goal. He's going to go make his hunt, and he's going to win. But then otherwise, when Josh Allen is not focused on the hunt, when he doesn't have that carrot, that goal in right in front of his eyes, he's just a ball of energy, according to Cromer. He's bouncing around. He's having fun, exactly like you would expect a Labrador retriever, kind of like a puppy. And as Cromer said, this is why people love Josh Allen. This is why people gravitate to Josh Allen. This is why he's become a hero in Western New York, because he is this guy. He is this fun-loving personality guy. And I tell people all the time from the experience that I have with him, and I'm certainly not someone who knows everything about Josh Allen, but I see him quite a bit in the locker room, away from cameras that people at home will see. And I can vouch for everything Aaron Cromer says. Josh Allen loves to have fun. Josh Allen loves to play jokes. And it's easy to see why so many people gravitate toward him and why he's such a good leader and why he's such a good face of the franchise for the Bills to have. But it does make me wonder if this is the best way for him to operate. If maybe the Labrador Retriever might be better off with a little more German Shepherd in him. And this is not to say being the Labrador Retriever is wrong. And I'll tell you, as someone who had a lot of experience in my industry, who talks to a lot of young people, certainly I have young people on my staff that I'm trying to educate and guide. And one thing I constantly tell everybody, be who you are. Be yourself turned up to 11. And that's what Josh Allen has been. Josh Allen has been him. And Josh Allen has been exactly what the Bills have needed, especially over these last 4 or 5 years. He's a great leader. He does everything so right. People will ask, is Josh Allen really as nice as he looks? Yes, he is. That guy has had an 11 out of 10 in intangibles from the moment he's arrived in Buffalo. So this is not to say, as Aaron Kromer says, being the Labrador Retriever is the wrong way to go about it. But to be fair, Josh Allen, the Labrador Retriever, has not been to a Super Bowl, right? So I think there's room to discuss whether or not there's a better way to go about it. And again, this is not to say that what he's doing is wrong. But maybe there's a different approach that will be equally as good, equally as successful, but work out better for the team. And again, the German Shepherd is the way I'll look at it. More of a police dog, more of an enforcer. And I'm not saying you flip from Josh Allen, the fun-loving, practical joker, and turn right around to being like a Tom Brady, Dan Marino-like jerk where you're ripping into guys all the time. But maybe a little more of that might be better. And I've thought this for a couple of years. As Allen gets older, as he matures, and as we all get older and mature and have more experiences, we do change how we approach things. We do adjust our personality. Certainly, as we get older, how we connect with people of different generations changes. Josh Allen's going to be 30 in May. Is he going to have the same connection with the guys who are 21, 22, 23 years old on the team? Will he have that same connection going forward? Is it the best way for him? Is it the best for the Bills if Josh Allen is everybody's buddy on the team? Because that's kind of the impression we've gotten from Josh Allen. And again, this is not to say it's wrong. It has worked 1,000%. And it's who he is. It's authentic. It works very well for Josh Allen. But it doesn't mean that maybe going about it a little bit different way might not be better for the team. Or it might be a better way to push guys to where the Bills want them to go. Remember that this team has not achieved its team goal under Josh Allen the last few years. It doesn't mean that he's the problem. Right now, the Bills are trying to find out maybe the head coach is the problem. That's what they're changing out right this second. So maybe Josh Allen can just keep being the Labrador Retriever and the new coach will fix what else is going on around him. It's very possible it could end up that way. But I've wondered for the last couple of years if it might make more sense for Josh Allen to be a little less of everybody's friend and a little bit more of the coach on the field, as opposed to being everybody's buddy, maybe he's a little more the big brother. The guy who sets the good example and pushes the younger brothers to do the right thing more often. Not all the time. Again, not a 180 personality change, just a little bit more. And when Josh Allen's 35 years old, if he's still the Labrador Retriever on the team, you might roll your eyes at that a little bit. But again, the point is that being who he's been so far has made him great, has made him an MVP, has made him, I think right now, arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. But it hasn't gotten the Bills to the Super Bowl. Maybe is there room for Allen to, again, not to argue that being the Labrador Retriever is some failing, but you're good here. Maybe you move over this way and you're good in this path, in this method. I don't even know if I'm right, but Aaron Kromer bringing up Josh Allen as the Labrador Retriever got me thinking again about where the Bills quarterback is going to be now as a 30-year-old player in the NFL. As he transitions to the figurative second half of his career, the 30 and above life? Does it still make sense for him to be the Labrador Retriever, to be bouncing around with the energy all the time? Maybe you do that for 70% of the time, and for 25, 30% of the time, you're more of the big brother figure, maybe even the father figure, to where you are creating boundaries and trying to enforce them. I don't know if I'm right, but the Labrador Retriever quarterback has not gone to the Super Bowl. Is it the head coach? We're going to find that out this year, next year, the year after. Maybe the quarterback needs to adjust what he's doing too. Just food for thought. Not saying that I'm 100% believing in that idea, because like I said, I have talked to young people all the time about be who you are. This is who Josh Allen is. And who Josh Allen is has made him great. Is there room for something different? I think there might be. All right, one more topic I want to get into here, at least significantly, is how the U.S. women's hockey team has reacted to the recent controversy. And for those of you who didn't see it, I'm sure just about everybody did, but there was a video in the U.S. men's hockey locker room after they won gold of President Trump talking about the women's team as an afterthought. Oh, we should invite them. And no matter what you think of any of the figures involved there, I think it goes without saying that those comments were not correct, were not appropriate. That's not how the women's team should be treated. Their accomplishments in the Olympics were equal to what the men did. They worked just as hard. Their win was just as impressive. So I think that's goes without saying. The level to how much it deserved criticism or how bad it was, you can argue amongst yourselves. But that was not the way, ideally, that should have been handled. Similarly, the men's team laughing at the comment was also not the way it should have been handled. But what happened here is that the women's hockey team got tossed now into a controversy that was not of their own making. This was not their fault. They didn't do anything wrong. They literally caught a stray from someone else's celebration. So now all of a sudden the women's hockey team is in the spotlight of what was said and has to answer for questions about what was said. What did you think? And I have been very impressed with everything the women's hockey team has said and has done about this since they started being put in front of a microphone to talk about it. All they've said, first of all, they haven't backed away from it. They've said that it was the wrong thing to say. They've said it was inappropriate. They've said it was distasteful. Distasteful, maybe you can argue with a little bit if you want to really, really open it up to discussion. But the women's team has not acquiesced or rolled over to the comment. They've said it was wrong. But they've also moved the focus, or attempted to, and I think have done a pretty good job at it, from the comment to, hey, we want to focus on the accomplishment. We want to focus on what we've done, how impressive it is that we've won the gold medal. Not from a please pat us on the back point of view, but just from a this is the thing that matters point of view, that we won gold, that this is something we've wanted for a long time, we've worked very hard at, and we've accomplished it. And I think it was the right thing to say. They haven't backed away from pointing out that they didn't think it was the right thing to say, but they've moved the conversation to where we all should be, which is congratulating this team on what they've done. They've avoided making the situation worse, I think, in a large part. They've avoided picking any extraneous fights about it. They've wanted to focus. They want the focus to be on their accomplishment and the accomplishment of the men's team too. And that's another part of this. Because like I said, the men's team laughing at the comment was not appropriate. Men's goalie Jeremy Swayman even said so, that they should have reacted better. And the way the women's team has handled the men's team in particular, that part of it, they've again not backed off from it. They've said it was a lapse. That's what Hillary Knight, the women's team captain, called it. It was a lapse. But she also said she felt like the men were in a tough spot. And I can understand what she's talking about there. I think if you're celebrating a championship, and this is not to excuse how the men reacted, but if you're celebrating, everything's great, you're overjoyed, it was a dramatic win in overtime, I can understand you being a little bit out of your skull. That this is a dream come true, realized in the most dreamy way possible, and you're just excited about everything. Everything is awesome. That you as a team might overlook what was said there. Doesn't make it right, but I can understand what she's referring to with the men being in a tough spot, with their reaction to what was said. And she also said it's a great learning point. Again, the women have taken this controversy in large part and have said, yes, it was wrong. It was something that was not handled the right way, but let's focus it on the positive. Let's focus it on the accomplishment that we've had, the accomplishment that the men's team had. And as Hillary Knight said, let's make it a great, quote, learning point. Let's move forward. Let's not get stuck sitting on this negative thing that happened. And that's not easy to do. These are 22, 23, 25, 30-year-old women. These are not seasoned media pros. This could have gone a number of ways. And the women, I think, have handled this gracefully. They've handled this trying to push it to the positive. They've also strengthened, I think, the bond that they apparently have with the men's team. Because there's a question, the men's team would tell you, hey, we're big fans of the women's team. We pull together, we root for each other. And coming off the only evidence of their relationship with the women's team being them laughing at an inappropriate joke, you could wonder about that. But the women's team has turned around and said, no, this is how they are. We are tight with them. We get along. We root for each other. And you can understand how that would happen, because if you're a player on an Olympic hockey team, there's very few people in America that you could discuss that with, that you have a shared experience with. So I think it makes sense for the men's team and the women's team to be fairly tight, to have a connection, to get along. And yeah, while the men's team might have hurt that a little bit, the way the women's team has approached it, or at least what's been said so far, is like Hillary Knight said, it was a lapse. It was a bad decision. And I think all of us would agree that we should not be judged by our one worst mistake. We should not have our entire personality assigned to one bad choice. Now, not every one bad mistake and bad choice is the same, and you all can debate that among yourselves. But I think we can all agree that there's a number of mistakes that it's unfair to judge a person by. And the women's team right here is saying, even though this thing the men's team did was wrong, we're still connected. We still support each other. We still have a bond. And if they say that, that's good enough for me. If they feel like the total experience that they've had associating with the men's hockey team, dealing with them, having that connection, interacting with them, if they feel like all of that evidence outweighs the one bad choice that we all saw, then that's good enough for me. And I'm encouraged, and I think it's easy to feel optimistic about a number of things in general if you want, but I think the idea that the women's team here is not dismissing their connection with the men's team based on this one incident, this one mistake. They still have that connection. And again, they've taken this negative situation and pushed it to a positive. Just like they want to take the focus off the controversy, off of the mistake, and push it towards the accomplishment, they also want to take the focus off what the men's team did wrong and push the focus toward the connection, the bond that they have. This could have gone a number of ways. This could have gotten the women's team, if they wanted to, I think could have taken this to a much more angry level. They could have fanned the flames of the controversy if they had wanted to. And again, I give them credit for not backing off what they felt was wrong, just for the sake of making everybody happy, but still finding a way to attempt to push this toward a positive outcome, toward a more encouraging, connected, unifying situation. It's hard to do in a world where hate and rage sells, right? This is what social media is almost built on these days, is creating fights. I got to admit, I'm as addicted to it as anybody. But this women's team, in a spotlight they didn't ask for, a spotlight they did not deserve, in a situation where they should have been lauded for their accomplishments just as much as the men's team, and I think in large part they were. In many other situations, they certainly were. For them to end up in this spot and then try and turn it around to a positive, I thought was very, very impressive. And like Hillary Knight said, it's a great learning point for a lot of people. Not just what happened that was wrong, but I think the way the women's team reacted to it was equally right. So good on the women's team for doing that. I just wanted to point it out. A controversy again that easily becomes social media fodder that we're all going to flip through our feeds and wonder who said this, what are they saying about that, going through people's reaction, everybody's angry about it. The women didn't focus on the anger. They focused on the positives. They focused on the connection. They focused on the unification, the unifying parts of this. And it was the right thing to do. And you want to talk about a learning point, I think we could all learn from how they reacted to that situation. See if anything else is out in the report cards here. Nope. All right, I do want to remind you to check out BKL Nightly. It's going to be on again tonight, right here on Rochester First. Me and Caleb Carr and Rachel Lyrick, we're going to talk some combine stuff. We're also going to discuss free agency and the salary cap and cap cuts. Who could the Bills potentially move on from heading into this offseason because of salary cap issues? The Bills do have a number of players that are in this situation, like we talked about earlier with Taylor Rapp, along with Dawson Knox. I think those are the two big names. Curtis Samuel's got a big chunk of money that the Bills could save. What a disappointing signing that has been. I think it's almost a lock that they will move on from him. So we'll get into that tonight, 8:30, right here on Rochester First. One more thing before I go. Sabres are back, baby. 2-1 win over the Devils. The projection I saw is that the stat that lets you know where the Sabres are at playoff-wise, and I know Sabres fans are pushing this everywhere, and deservedly so with how good they've been. Basically, the Sabres have 24 games left, or that's a real thing. Basically, they need to win 12 of them to get to 96 points. It's kind of the baseline to make the playoffs. So that's 1 point a game, right? Currently in the Eastern Conference, let me double check this. 1 point a game is a pace that everybody's on except for one team. No, I take that back. Every single team in the Eastern Conference is averaging at least a point a game. So the Sabres with 24 points, 24 games left. If they just do, the Rangers. I didn't have my glasses on, my bad. The Rangers have 50 points in 57 games. The other 13 teams in the Eastern Conference, the other 15 teams in the Eastern Conference, my bad, are averaging at least 1 point per game. So if the Sabres can do what 15 of 16 teams are currently doing in the East, they will probably make the playoffs. In addition, the projections range from 80 to 90% in terms of what analytic service you want to use. The Sabres are going to make the playoffs this year, barring a collapse. And the point I want to make before I go is that I don't think making the playoffs is the goal anymore for Buffalo. I think this is a team that can do some real damage. They haven't had a 3-game losing streak since what, like October? Full schedule for the Sabres. The last time the Sabres lost 3 in a row was December 8th. The last time the Sabres lost 4 games of 7, also December 8th. So we're heading into March now. 3 consecutive months where if you want to make the regular season into a bunch of best-of-7 series, the Sabres haven't lost one yet. Going all the way back to December. Obviously, this is no fluke. We're way past the level there. I do think, I don't want to say it's impossible they miss the playoffs. Anything can happen, but the odds are significantly in their favor. This is a team that's proven that I think they can play consistently at a pretty high level. Now, does this mean they go to a Stanley Cup? I don't know. Winning, what would it be, 12 games of 21 against the best teams in your conference over a 3-week period, that's tough for anybody to do. And for a Sabres team that hasn't been there before and doesn't exactly have the goaltending to where you would think they can ride a hot goalie to a championship, it would seem unlikely. But the idea the Sabres are going to roll into the playoffs and lose in 5 games, I think is selling the bar too low for this team. Again, they lost 3 of 4 going into the Olympic break. And the last time, again, they lost 3 of 4 was the 3-game losing streak at the beginning of December. So it's been a while before this team has looked shaky for any kind of extended period of time. I would think sometime between now and the end of the season, they're going to go through a little bit of a rut. There's going to be a downswing. But this is a team to me that I think right now the bar is not making the playoffs. The bar is winning a series. I think this team needs to expect to at least make it to round 2 of the playoffs. And I think to then be a team that's a pain in the neck in round 2. It's wild to say with the Sabres, but again, if they go into round 1 and lose anything short of a super tight, decided by 1 bounce 7-game series, I think I'd be disappointed. That's where the Sabres are right now. They're good enough offensively. They've been able to build big leads, hold on to them. They've gotten good, better than expected goaltending. This is a team that should be able to do damage in the postseason. Maybe not Stanley Cup level damage, but damage for sure. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Endgame. We're back again on Monday. Be March the 2nd already. Free agent tampering period is open a week from Monday. So we got a lot of stuff to get to next week. By the way, also want to promote, I sat down with Bills play-by-play man Chris Brown. We're going to talk about that on Monday as well. Great interview with him about his career and how he got the job and what it means to him to be the voice of the Bills. Thanks for listening today. My name is Thad Brown. You're watching Rochester First. We'll see you again on
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.